Subscribe to my channel for more gripping stories like this one. Now, settle in because what you're about to hear, it's not just wild, it's downright unbelievable. They say truth needs no rehearsal, but inside a courtroom, oh buddy, it's less about truth and more about who can fake it best under pressure. Hi, I'm James McAllister. And just a few months ago, I was your average, peace-loving, middle-aged guy, living a pretty uneventful life. I had a modest job, a lawn I actually mowed myself, and a marriage that, while not perfect, hadn't gone completely off the rails. Or so I thought. Then, one fine Tuesday morning, you know, the kind where your coffee tastes just right, and you think the universe might finally be cutting you some slack, I opened my mailbox. Inside a thick, very official-looking envelope, court summons. Apparently, I was being sued by my own wife for $10,000 a month. For child support. For twins, let me repeat that. Twins. Twins I had never seen, never held, never named. Heck, I didn't even know they existed. Yeah, I know how that sounds. Imagine going to sleep, thinking your biggest issue is a leaky faucet, and waking up in a storyline that feels stolen from a daytime soap opera written by a drunk screenwriter. My first thought, this had to be a mistake, or a joke, or a very elaborate prank show. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. And that was just the opening scene. Now, let's rewind just a bit. My wife Laura and I had been married for almost 8 years. The first couple of years were great weekend brunches, road trips, even matching coffee mugs with ridiculous puns. But over time, things changed. Not in a dramatic, movie-style storming out with a suitcase kind of way. No, it was slower, colder, quieter, like two people becoming polite strangers in the same house. I traveled a lot for work logistics, warehouse management, not glamorous, but it paid the bills. And Laura, she mostly stayed home, said she was freelancing, handling some kind of consulting, which I now realize was code for plotting my financial destruction. Communication dried up. We stopped fighting because we stopped talking. But I never, not for 1 second, imagined she was capable of this. So when I got served those court papers, claiming I owed child support for 2 kids I didn't know existed, it felt like reality cracked in half. I immediately called her, and, "What do you know?" She answered, "James," she said in that perfectly rehearsed calm voice. The same voice she used when we hosted dinner parties, and she wanted everyone to believe we were still happily married. "You can't just ignore this. They need support." "The hell are you talking about, Laura? What kids? Are you seriously telling me you had children and just forgot to mention it?" She sighed, like I was the unreasonable one. Then she hung up, and that's when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a setup, a carefully calculated, courtroom-ready, $10,000 per month con. Well, if she wanted war, I was ready to fight. I'm not the kind of guy who hires investigators. But desperate times, right? That's when Carla entered the picture. Sharp eyes, sharper tongue, and absolutely no tolerance for liars. She was recommended by a friend who once used her to expose a cheating golf buddy. Long story, but the point is, Carla was relentless, and thank God for that. Within a week, she had uncovered some glaring red flags. Yes, there were birth certificates for these so-called twins, but plot twist, no mention of me as the father, none, even weirder. Hospital records showed no indication that Laura had ever given birth. No prenatal appointments, no delivery, nada. When I showed Laura the paperwork, hoping, maybe, this was some kind of clerical disaster, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "It's not about you anymore, James, it's about the kids." That's when I laughed. "Which kids?" I asked. "The invisible ones you invented to bleed me dry." Her expression, stone cold. Like she actually believed her own lie. Or had repeated it enough times to make it feel real. Now I'm not a fighter by nature. I'd rather solve things with logic, or, if that fails, a strong cup of tea and silence. But this was a trap, and I wasn't going to be the sucker caught in it. I gathered every document, printed every text, bank statement, and post-it note from the last 3 years. I met with my lawyer, Mark, a bulldog in a suit, who once got a restraining order lifted in under 24 hours. The man was a legend, and together with Carla, we began to piece together what looked less like a custody dispute, and more like a criminal conspiracy. Because here's the thing, the twins, they were real, just not mine. Enter Richard Hale. You ever hear a name that just sounds like it belongs to a villain? That's Richard Hale. He was Laura's business associate, though I'm pretty sure their business involved more bedroom than boardroom. Carla found emails, dozens between Laura and Richard, plotting the entire scheme. Turns out, Richard had kids, twins, with someone else. But after ditching the mother, he started skipping child support payments. His solution: pin the kids on me. The clueless traveling husband who didn't see the trap until the trap was already snapping shut. There were bank transfers to offshore accounts, shady wire transfers under fake names, and texts where Laura joked about how easy it was to trick James. And if that didn't burn enough, one message read, "He's too dull to fight back. He'll just pay. Oh honey, watch me." The courtroom was packed on hearing day. Reporters, legal interns, even the janitor lingered to see what was about to go down. Laura showed up in a white blouse and baby pink cardigan, full innocent mom mode. Her lawyer shuffled stacks of paper like he was preparing to defend Mother Teresa herself. I showed up with 2 folders, one labeled Truth, the other Destruction. When the judge asked if I had anything to present, I took out the paternity test first. "Your Honor," I said, trying not to grin, "I'm not the father. And here's proof, from not 1, but 2 independent labs." You could hear the courtroom inhale. Laura blinked. Her lawyer fumbled with his pen, but I wasn't done. That was just Act 1. Now, let me tell you, watching Laura's face crumble in real time, that alone was worth every sleepless night. But the real fun began when her lawyer tried to object. "The paternity test is inconclusive," he declared, waving his hand like he was shooing a fly off a cheese platter. "Oh, please. I had been ready for that one, actually," I said. "Here's the second test conducted last week, chain of custody intact, certified by a forensic lab, also not my kids." Boom. Lawyer goes silent. Laura suddenly finds the floor incredibly interesting. But even then, the judge wasn't fully convinced. After all, Laura had a decent performance going, soft-spoken, playing the concerned mother. Tearful glances toward the twins, so I made sure the next move would crush the act entirely. I leaned forward and said, "Your Honor, I request a court-ordered DNA test for one Richard Hale." The room went still. The judge narrowed his eyes. "On what grounds?" I slid a set of emails across the bench. "Because this isn't a custody dispute, it's a fraud operation, and he's at the center of it." And with that, the match had officially lit the fuse. Carla, bless her relentless soul, had pulled back the curtain on something way bigger than we ever expected. This wasn't just Laura and Richard trying to dodge child support. No, they were part of a much bigger scheme. A fraud ring, targeting divorced men, military personnel, and anyone too busy or emotionally burned out to fight back. The pattern was sickeningly precise. Fake paternity, falsified medical records, forged school documents, lawyers who looked the other way, and women who, like Laura, played the victim card with Oscar-worthy precision. The money laundered through shell companies, offshore accounts, and phony childcare non-profits. The network had already drained hundreds of thousands of dollars from other men, and Laura and Richard Day were at the heart of it. Once word of the subpoena hit Richard's inbox, things escalated fast. That very night, I got a call from Carla. "Check your email," she said. There in my inbox was a forwarded message. Richard had transferred a large sum, nearly $150,000, from one of the dummy corporations into a foreign account. A classic last-ditch move, a getaway fund, so we moved fast. Mark, my lawyer, filed an emergency injunction and notified the authorities. Meanwhile, Laura's team started throwing legal spaghetti at the wall, counterclaims, motions to dismiss, character attacks. They even tried to dig up an ex from college who once said I was emotionally unavailable. But I wasn't rattled. I had one thing they didn't. The truth. By the time the next court date arrived, we weren't playing defense anymore. We were bringing fire. I walked into that courtroom, armed like a legal assassin. DNA tests, email chains, bank records. A sworn affidavit from a former girlfriend of Richard's. Yes, Carla had tracked down one of Richard's old flames, who spilled everything about how he bragged about pinning babies on soft targets. Sick, right? This time, the judge didn't hesitate. A federal investigator was assigned to the case. Richard Hale was ordered to appear in court. Laura, she looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Gone was the soft cardigan, replaced by a stiff suit, heavy concealer, and eyes that darted like a trapped animal. Outside the courthouse, cameras were everywhere. My case had gone public, and I wasn't hiding anymore. With Laura's scheme unraveling, her behavior turned erratic. She started sending me long, emotional voicemails. You know, the kind half apology, half gaslighting. You know I never meant to hurt you. Everything got out of hand. They're just children, James. Yeah, children that aren't even mine. Laura, she even showed up at my house. Once, sobbing in the driveway, claiming she was being used by Richard. Nice try. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I handed the security footage straight to the court, because at this point, every moment she opened her mouth was just more evidence. Carla found the final smoking gun, a burner phone. In it. Dozens of messages between Laura and Richard. Don't worry, he's clueless. He'll cave once he sees the twins. Once this goes through, we can move to Belize. I printed those texts out and brought them to court like they were family photos. The judge flipped through them, jaw tightening with each message. By the end of the hearing, he slammed the folder shut and said, "This court has seen enough." He issued a full investigation into Laura and Richard, including their finances, business ties, and any connection to similar cases. A week later, Richard Hale was arrested. Laura was placed under house arrest pending trial. The media exploded. Child support scam, ring busted. Wife and lover, accused in multi-state paternity fraud. Innocent man targeted in elaborate hoax. Every headline made me feel a little more human again. But you know the best part. The number of men who came forward. Emails, messages, anonymous letters, all of them saying the same thing. I thought I was alone. I wasn't just clearing my name, I was blowing the whistle on a whole ecosystem of deception. At the final pretrial hearing, Laura stood up, trembling, pale, and with no lawyers beside her. She said 5 words, "I'm sorry, I was wrong, too late for that. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every man who was silenced, every family torn apart, every truth buried under false testimony." The judge ordered restitution. The twins were placed with a real foster family. The scam ring, torn apart and under federal indictment. The trial wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was a reckoning by the time it kicked off. The courtroom looked like a movie set. Reporters packed the gallery, legal students scribbled in notebooks, and the judge had already earned a nickname in the press, Noby S. Collins. Fitting. Laura and Richard Hale were finally in the hot seat, charged with fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and about half a dozen financial crimes. No sane person would ever want their name attached to me. I was the star witness, not the role I ever wanted, but the one I was born for. Apparently I took the oath, straightened my tie, and sat down. The lead prosecutor nodded. "Mr. McAllister, can you walk us through the moment you realized this wasn't just a child support claim, it was a setup?" I did more than that. I walked them through everything. The day I got the lawsuit, Laura's cold reaction on the phone, the forged records, the burner phones, faked school documents, the DNA results, the Belize escape plan, every single detail, for over 3 hours. I testified, voice steady, facts tight, no theatrics needed. The truth didn't need exaggeration. It was already unbelievable. When I pulled out the printed messages between Laura and Richard, the courtroom fell quiet. A pin drop kind of silence. Laura stared at the floor. Richard crossed his arms and glared like some washed-up, mob boss who realized the cameras weren't gonna save him. Laura's lawyer tried one last desperate move, painting her as a victim. She was manipulated, he said. She was vulnerable. Richard Hale took advantage of her emotional fragility. Emotional fragility. The same woman who coordinated wire fraud while sipping lattes. Nice try. Then Richard's defense attorney stood up and went full conspiracy mode. This is a smear campaign, he barked. There's no proof Richard even knew Laura intimately. Unfortunately for him, that's when the prosecution played a video. Security footage, Richard and Laura kissing in the parking lot of one of their fake business offices at 3:14 p.m. on a weekday. So much for no proof. The jury didn't even flinch. After 2 weeks of testimony, cross-examinations, and enough drama to make HBO jealous, the jury deliberated for just 4 hours. When they returned, the room was tense. My heart thudded in my chest, but I didn't look at Laura. I didn't need to. I already knew. On all counts, the foreman said, "We find the defendants guilty," Laura gasped. Richard didn't even blink. The judge leaned forward, voice low but sharp. "You two didn't just commit fraud, you weaponized love, parenthood, family. You used the most sacred bonds in our society as tools for greed." Then he dropped the hammer. Laura, 20 years in federal prison, with no chance of parole for 15. Richard Hale, life without parole, due to multiple prior convictions and conspiracy across state lines. I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I'd felt in years, but this wasn't just about a verdict, it was about redemption. I went home that night and sat in silence for a long time. No music, no news, just quiet. Then I poured myself a glass of bourbon, looked out the window, and let it sink in. It was over. Laura's gone, Richard's gone, and me. I was finally free, but I didn't just ride off into the sunset. I started speaking out on podcasts, in support groups, at legal conferences, because here's the ugly truth. There are more stories like mine, too many. Men afraid to come forward, silenced by shame, disbelief, or broken systems. So I made it my mission to help them. I started a small non-profit called Stand Up Dads, free legal resources, investigative referrals, emotional support for victims of parental fraud. It's grown faster than I ever imagined, and the best part, some of the guys I helped, they're helping others now, like a chain reaction of justice. Ah yes, the twins, turns out, they were conceived via anonymous sperm donor. Laura never told anyone. She just saw an opportunity to manipulate the narrative and cash in. The court placed them with a foster family, to women with big hearts and zero tolerance for drama. Last I heard, the boys were thriving. Enrolled in school, playing soccer, safe. They'll never know the full chaos of what happened behind the scenes. And that's fine by me. They deserve a clean slate. So, what did I learn? That betrayal doesn't always come in big, dramatic waves. Sometimes, it creeps in slowly. A smile that lasts too long, a truth withheld, a hand that only reaches when it wants something. But I also learned this: the truth has teeth. It doesn't just sit quietly. It bites, it tears, it waits, and then it devours everything built on lies. And when it does, you better believe it shows up with a full appetite. So, if you ever find yourself drowning in false accusations, betrayal, or manipulation, don't fold. Dig, fight, scream the truth if you have to. Because the moment you stop believing them, and start believing yourself, that's when the tide turns. It's been a year since the trial. I'm back to my ordinary life, and I've never loved ordinary more. My coffee, still hot, my lawn, still patchy. My sleep, peaceful, for once. And sometimes, when I'm driving home, windows down, I'll smile and whisper to myself, they really thought I'd roll over. But the thing about quiet men, they're the ones who hit the hardest when they finally speak. Thanks for listening, and if you liked this story, or if you've ever been knocked down and climbed your way back up, hit that subscribe button, because here at Twist Diary, we don't just tell stories, we fight with them.